Welcome to Fireside Jets. My name is Alex and my co-host here, Ryan Moran. And today we want to take a look at a couple of cut candidates for this New York Jets team as we head toward training camp in the middle of July. Now, yesterday we talked about a low-key tight end in Lawrence Cager. We've discussed a couple of these guys, dynamic wide receivers, the secondary, stocks up, stocks down. But today we want to take a look at some guys who could be on the fringe of the roster at running back and offensive tackles, some defensive linemen. Definitely going to be some nice position battles this upcoming training camp period and then preseason to go with it. It's going to be a battle, and it's going to be fun to watch because as COVID's over, we can finally get some eyes on these situations and how they're unfolding with the film and people in person and stuff like that. So it's going to be fun. But Ryan, before we dive into this specific segment, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing great, Alex. With a much improved roster between free agency and the draft with all the premium we've had now really over the last two off seasons, it leads to, improved roster competition throughout. And that, really creates a lot more depth, obviously, and, more players chopping blocks, so to speak, at the end of training camp. And, we got one particular player and then really two position groups that, have a good amount of depth. And you're probably going to see, a good player or two, who's on the roster, over the past 2 to 3 years who, may end up being available.
Yeah, I mean, look, every year there's a couple of surprise cuts, but these seem to be pretty realistic. We're going to start out with the running backs, and specifically, of course, you got Zonovan Knight competing for spots. You have Breece Hall, and now you obviously got Michael Carter as well. So there's a lot of talent there. There's not enough space. And then you got Tevin Coleman. How could I forget about Tevin Coleman? Really solid pass catching running back and pick up the slack on those third downs and really help supplement any injuries or fatigue or whatever it might be. But the two guys that, we have in mind here, Ty Johnson and LaMichael P. Ryan, these are two guys who are definitely on the fringe of the roster at this point. I can even see P. Ryan ending up on the practice squad. These guys, they're valuable in some facets, but other ways, not as much. Ty Johnson, 24 years old last season, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a couple of fumbles to go with it. Receiving wise, 372 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns there. So he definitely made more of an impact as a receiver than a running back. So, if the Jets, I think personally, Michael Carter is going to be a lethal pass catcher for the Jets offense. And, Breece Hall is more of your workload. He can catch the ball. Don't be concerned about that. But he's more going to be your downhill running workhorse type of guy. He's going to get a lot of reps in that facet if the Jets want to give him those responsibilities immediately. Now, Michael P. Ryan, on the other hand, did not play at all, really. He only had 31 yards on 8 rushes. He was basically a non-factor. So now you're adding Breece Hall to the mix. I would agree with you in the sense that LaMichael Piron's definitely a fringe roster player. I would imagine if they had to pick between the two, Piron's the odd man out, and Ty Johnson may get on the roster just based on his abilities as a receiving running back. What are you thinking about these two guys?
100%. So just to kind of start from the top, with Breece being drafted, obviously, and he's going to come in and, command a significant role from the jump. Michael Carter's a great complementary piece, as just in terms of their size, differences, and they kind of complement each other just with their, receiving ability, pass blocking, and, they have that contact balance, the zone running scheme fit with their vision and patience. Tevin Coleman, I think, is really locked into that third running back position. When you look at his experience in the system, he's a vet, he offers the speed that you look for. And, like you said, I mean, he can still catch the football out of the backfield as well. So you're locked in with those three guys. And if you're keeping Nick Bowden as a fullback, it really kind of makes things crowded. You obviously touched up on Zonovan Knight there as an undrafted free agent who was, intriguing. It was, a bit of a shock that he went undrafted, and it was a nice, addition for the Jets to be able to scoop him up thereafter. And, Ty Johnson and Michael Piron have both been with the Jets since 2020. Piron is a 4th-round draft pick, and Ty was claimed through waivers like early in the season. And, that 20 season, I think Ty really showed some good potential, and people were excited about him going into last year. And he had a couple of good moments, I feel like, early on in the season, especially. And you felt like he was going to fit in the scheme just with his speed. You look at this LaFleur Shanahan system and, the Raheem Mosterts, Matt Breidas of the world who've really thrived just with that speed, that home run hitting ability, big play threat. And, Ty, I think out of the backfield early in the season, he had some good moments. The Bengal game obviously jumps out. He had his best game running against the Patriots, but, down the stretch, it was just the drops, obviously, like you touched up on. And I don't necessarily know if he fits the zone running scheme with his vision and patience as a runner. So that kind of made it tough for him last year. I think, he's probably, him and Peter are really in competition for that 4th spot. And Perine, what he, offers and helps himself with to this group really is just his size and power. That's kind of the one element that he brings that makes him, a bit rare for this group. And, it obviously does help that he was a recent 4th-round draft pick. So I think ultimately, especially if Nick Bowden is kept as a fullback, that, reps are probably going to be limited, and it's going to lead to, a lot of competition here for the final few spots on the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's never a bad thing to have extremely talented players at one position group, right? You can never have too many great guys at one spot. And the Jets seemingly have a very, very great running back room, especially since they're so young. That's the best thing. They're all on rookie contracts. Running backs are that position that, if you're the Giants, you have Saquon Barkley, or you're, Derrick Henry, you're paying these guys big bucks, and you're not going to win anything because running backs do not win championships. This is, and look, as a Giants fan, I can tell you from firsthand experiences, investing too much in running backs is the worst thing you can do if you're a general manager or anything. The thing is, the Jets didn't do that. They did not put first-round picks into running backs. They did not dump $10 million a year into running backs. Michael Carter is a stud. Breece Hall was my number one running back on the board. He was worth the draft pick, right? He's a stud. He's a workhorse. He's going to be your knockoff Jonathan Taylor, right? Like, that's how his style of running. I talked about this a couple of days ago. His style of running mimics Jonathan Taylor's very, very closely. Now, if the Jets have a really good run-blocking offensive line, you're going to see him actually have a very good rookie season. Now, the question is, how do they split up the reps between Breece Hall and Michael Carter? I'm very curious to see how they kind of operate in that facet, but I do think the back end of that with Tevin Coleman, obviously, he's probably established, and then you have, Donovan Knight, who I think will probably end up in the practice squad. And then you have, of course, Ty Johnson and Michael Perine. Perine, I think, is the odd man out. Ty Johnson will probably earn just a fringe roster spot, but he'll get on there. Now, heading over to offensive tackle, you had an interesting name in mind, Chuma Edoga. Tell me a little about Chuma Edoga and what he brings to this team, and why you think he could be a cut candidate.
So with Chuma Edoga, obviously he was a 3rd-round draft pick in 2019, and there were some expectations and promise when he was drafted. I think, his first year or two when he had opportunities, there were some good things that he went out there and showed. But, you look at some of the major investments that Joe Douglas has made since he's taken over, and Edoga is actually the only player on this offensive line to not have been acquired by Douglas. He's completely overhauled it the last 3 off seasons. And, you look at George Fant, Mekhi Becton, and even the recent draft pick of Max Mitchell in the 4th round, who's really that developmental, ideal 3rd swing offensive tackle for the line, to this group. And recently they obviously brought Riley Reef in on a visit. Even earlier this offseason, one of the first few days in free agency, they re-signed Connor McDermott, who has been with the team since 2019 and, has gained some experience really last year as a swing player. And, I think it just leads to kind of a bit of an uphill battle for Edoga on the last year of his final contract. Wasn't drafted by the staff, obviously. And, especially if a Riley Reef is added, I think Connor McDermott's probably even ahead of him on the depth chart. So, it's probably a bit of an uphill battle for him there entering his 4th year with the team.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Max Mitchell guy, they probably want to groom him, mid-round pick, and he's a little bit undersized, so I think he'll need a little bit more time to get his frame right. But he is definitely a feisty guy. He's fast, he's quick. I would not be surprised if he was kind of that swing tackle in the future, and Chuma kind of was the odd man out. But he has shown some decent things, especially as a run blocker. Hasn't had that many snaps or that many opportunities, only 82 run blocking snaps in 2020 and 38 last year, but he graded out pretty well as a pass blocker, not very good at all. Gave up 6 sacks as a rookie and only 270 pass blocking snaps, which is insane. 2 sacks in 2020 and then 1 last year. He has had some trouble with penalties as well. So as a pass blocker, I wouldn't trust him. I don't think he, against Cincinnati last year, he actually graded out pretty well. He only gave up 1 quarterback hurry over 35 pass blocking snaps. So at left tackle. So maybe there is something there, maybe better coaching. Maybe Douglas, helped him out last season. He had his best pass blocking grade, definitely had his best pass blocking year, but the thing is the sample size was so small. It's really hard to determine if he's actually going to take a big step forward. So Chuma, I would assume, probably fringe right now, depending on how Max Mitchell plays. There'll probably be a position battle for that roster spot. Not that they're going to get rid of Max Mitchell, obviously, but more or less, Chuma, if Max Mitchell impresses, Chuma may get kind of the short end of the stick simply because they might want to use that roster spot for another position. Maybe that's a little bit weaker, especially if they bring in a guy like Riley Reef. But I think if Riley Reef, if they liked him, they probably would have signed him the same day. So, usually when a couple days passes, it's a good indication that they're probably not going to go in that direction. But who knows? Maybe they're waiting to see if someone gets injured or someone, is not performing well. You really never know with these things. So Chuma Edoga, really interesting name to point out there. And you had two options for the defensive line as well, Jonathan Marshall and Tim Ward. Tell me about those two guys and why you think they are fringe roster players at this point.
100%. So Jonathan Marshall was a guy that Jets drafted in the 6th round in 2021, and a guy who athletically tested off the charts generationally well. I think he was near like the 100 percentile, and he wasn't all the prospect. So, I guess it maybe does limit some of the upside athletically, but this is a guy who I think ideally you wanted to really kind of allow to red shirt last year, develop, kind of season him similar to what the Jets did with Foley Fatukasi. He really didn't play his rookie year. And then, 2019 was his first opportunity. He broke out, the last 3 years was a great contributor. And I think that was kind of the, expectation that maybe some had with Marshall, but you're hearing some of the buzz yesterday about Nathan Shepard and the fact that the Jets really like him and maybe see him, as a starter in that Fatukasi role against the run, obviously. And you just look at the numbers up front. I mean, they're probably going to have 10, 11 guys on this D line between Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson, Quentin Williams, John Franklin Myers, some of the backups, Sheldon Rankins, Solomon Thomas, Jacob Martin, Bryce Huff, Michael Clemens, Vinny Curry. Like, it's a very steep group. And I think, Marshall, while they probably want to continue to develop him because of his athletic traits, you just look at the numbers, and if they're really liking Shepard and want to keep him around, I think it makes it tough. I mean, you can really only keep so many up front. And then, with Tim Ward, he was a guy they acquired off waivers shortly before the start of last season. And he was on the active roster all throughout the regular season. Didn't really play a whole lot, but he was with the team all year. And, with all these edge additions, with Lawson coming back, Jermaine Johnson, Jacob Martin, Michael Clemens, I think it's probably going to be a bit of a tougher, competition for him to be on the roster this year.
Yeah, I mean, these guys definitely fringe roster players to begin with, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were cut. But, is there any surprise guys that you have in mind that you might be like, I see why they did it, but I didn't expect it? I think one of them that comes to mind, this might be, let me know if this is a hot take. I think that LaMarcus Joyner might be a guy that they could, a surprise cut. With his injury history, getting Jordan Whitehead, you still have Ashton Davis, LaMarcus Joyner. Maybe they want to save the cash and go with a younger guy, but I think they also like the experience there. If the injuries kind of are prevalent during training camp and he's kind of not able to do much, I wonder if they would consider cutting him.
100%. I mean, the Jets have tons of depth at safety. We've talked about, after Whitehead, you have, of course, Jason Pinnock's been getting opportunities there. Ashton Davis, Elijah Riley, Will Parks, they've re-signed as well. I think the one thing with Joyner, though, is most of his contract is fully guaranteed, which kind of makes it a little bit tough for the Jets to cut bait. But I don't think you're off there. I mean, there's a lot of youth and guys who they maybe see with more upside and potential long-term who maybe, end up getting more starting reps than we think. I think Joyner will probably have a role just because of his veteran experience, his versatility. But, some of these young athletes like Ashton Davis and Jason Pinnock, maybe as the season progresses, could take more reps from him.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the roster. There's just so much youth. Like, there's not any really like surprise cuts you could make. Like Sheldon,
youngest roster in the NFL last year. So,
yeah, I mean, they're just so young. It's like, who would you even cut out of these guys? I mean, maybe one of the linebackers. I don't think they're going to cut Jamian Sherwood though.
No.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, look at these guys: Elijah Tucker, Laken Tomlinson, C.J. Uzuma, all just signed. Whitehead, Quincy Williams is interesting. I think he'll have a good year though. Yeah.
I think if the key two quarterbacks, maybe Mike White or Joe Flacco becomes available. Maybe.
I kind of like Mike White. I mean, Joe Flacco, he's a veteran. He's there to help Zach Wilson develop. But we've seen this story before with, what's his name? And Sam Darnold. Who do they have there? They were like
Josh McCown.
Josh McCown. And that didn't work. You don't need a veteran quarterback to help your young guys, right? Like, I think you stick with Mike White. He showed some flash last year. He can come in and get the job done if need be. So I think that makes sense. This team is really young. There's not really many surprise cuts you can make, honestly. But I do think Ty Johnson, Michael P. Ryan, Chuma Edoga makes sense. Jonathan Marshall, Tim Ward, I'd say they're probably going to be cut. Definitely not enough room for them to kind of make an impact. Maybe they land on the practice squad or something like that. So we'll see how it goes. But guys, I wonder what you guys think about potential cut candidates for this Jets team. If there's anyone you have in mind, maybe a surprise guy. It's hard to pick, honestly, because there's just so much talent, but there's also like the back end. The depth is a little bit weak at some points, but running back is deep. Offensive tackle, a little bit shallow. If one guy goes down, they definitely might want to go out and get a guy like Riley Reef, which makes sense, but haven't made a contract offer just yet. So we'll keep you guys updated on that if anything does progress there. Defensive line, some good, decent players, a lot of depth, but Jonathan Marshall and Tim Ward on the edge definitely could end up being cut here. Curious to hear your thoughts. As always, my friends, hope you enjoyed this episode of Fireside Jets. Make sure to like and subscribe. Keep showing the love. We appreciate it. And we just want to build this community around you and have some fun. That's what we're here for. Enjoy a nice, successful Jets season. It's been quite a while, and we want to see it. We want to see Zach Wilson take that step forward. As always, my friends, make sure to like, subscribe. As I said before, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Jets episode.